Houses for Migrants, the eighth installment of Curriculum of Grace, a series of articles chronicling God's pursuit of a young man impervious to the teaching of elders. We were supposed to build houses for migrants, but the plan never materialized. So there we were, 20 teenagers stuck in a broken-down old house on the outskirts of Capac, Michigan, a village of less than 2,000. 20 teenagers, 2 group leaders, a summer work camp sponsored by the American Friends Service Committee, the Quakers. All we wanted was to do good in the world. I was 18 that summer, just graduated from an all-boys boarding school, headed for Harvard in the fall. A friend of my mother had recommended the Quaker work camp. It sounded intriguing. I'd enjoyed physical labor on our farmhouse the previous summer. Building houses for migrants in this faraway village promised to be even more interesting. Now, though, I was stuck in the middle of nowhere with 19 strangers my own age and 2 group leaders. We were warned to be careful what we said and how we acted. The local people were suspicious of outsiders, especially if they mixed with the migrants whom they depended on for their livelihood. Looking back, I don't envy the group leaders the task of keeping all of us occupied without raising hackles of people around us. But I can see that God had a plan for me that summer. Not what I signed up for by a long shot, but one that bore fruit in all kinds of ways I couldn't have anticipated. Our first task was to organize play for young children in the migrant camps, while the adults and older children worked in the fields. The camps were shed-like structures, arranged around a central building that served as a community center, with tiny crude bathrooms, open-air showers, and a single faucet to supply water for drinking and dishwashing. In a sun-baked grassless area nearby, we managed games for however many children were allowed to come outside. Not many at first, but more as we slowly gained the trust of adults who stayed behind to care for them. It was my first experience leading games for children, and I was surprised at how eagerly they joined in and how quickly they picked up the rules despite their limited English and our non-existent Spanish. To get to know other adults, we arranged for a movie night in the community center. A young man I met after the film asked about my plans for the fall. On learning I would attend college, he beckoned me outside and confided that after working in the field nearly 10 years, he too hoped to go to college someday. I was glad the darkness hid my embarrassment. Though exactly my age, he was a man, not a boy, yet it was I who had achieved what he only dreamed of. We talked for a while about his hopes and dreams, as a warm breeze wafted incongruous smells of cooking, rotten fruit, and the trench bordering the camp that the men used as a urinal. A year or so later I remembered those scents and that man's soft, hopeful voice when an organizer for a farm workers union visited Harvard to recruit picketers. I had no qualms about following him. The play project didn't end well. One afternoon the workers came home from the fields early. A group of teenaged boys jeered at us, and a hail of stones followed our car as we drove off. It was hard to avoid thinking the trust we'd been cultivating didn't reach as deep as we'd hoped, and that beneath the friendliness we'd seen at the movie night lay suspicions as intense as those of the locals. My next assignment in a pristine modern school building was a relief after the scorching heat of the migrant camp, but here too there were hints that I'd ventured where I didn't belong. I served as teacher's aide in a summer program for migrant children. The elderly white teacher asked me to tutor Raul, a morose and uncooperative 8-year-old. Raul resisted every activity I proposed. I emptied a closet of games, flashcards, and all sorts of other paraphernalia in search of something to pique his interest, but he sat there in silence, arms folded, stubbornly refusing to meet my eyes. It was beginning to dawn on me that there was more going on in this town than just distrust of outsiders. Thus it was that, at age 18, I experienced a world outside myself and my own social group, encountering challenges I never would have faced in my sheltered home or the schools I attended. Random and unplanned as these experiences appeared at the time, they were a part of the design of my life, preparation for a world fraught with division and conflict. No human agency could have arranged such disparate signs to point to the ultimate question each of us faces. How do we find our way through such a world without having it swallow us? And if we survive its trials, what is in store for us at the end of the journey? I was not to find answers until much later in life, more than 50 years later, but that didn't mean the questions were posed prematurely. The curriculum of grace, comprised of experiences in my late teens, which no schoolmaster, indeed no human being, could have planned, was designed by God with His perfect timing to lead me along the path He had laid out for me before I was born. I saw the signs and followed, never suspecting where the path led. The divisions I saw that summer in the K-Pac community did not weigh on me then as they would later. Whatever ailed Raoul, the stone throwers at the labor camp, and the suspicious villagers barely encroached on my daily experience, living in an old house in the midst of that great flat empty landscape with a cross-section of earnest middle-class teenagers from all over America. The people I lived with in that house were an entirely different facet of the curriculum of grace. Though white and middle class like me, they came from backgrounds very different from those of my boarding school classmates. Every hour I spent with them broadened my social horizons. Little by little, they drew me out of the brittle East Coast intellectual shell I had built for myself. None did this more so than 3 girls I became friends with and who I kept in touch with after the summer was over.